Good morning. So, Ruth, today's class we're going to call the psychology of fear.
Can we like mute a little just because it's a little loud and
okay, so
background.
If anybody could mute themselves if you have background noise. Good morning, Diane. Good morning. How's the breakfast? Good? All right. So Roosevelt said you have nothing to fear but fear itself. Now, sometimes when we discuss fear, we say, well, I'm fear of failure, fear of danger. But there's also fear of success. There's also fear of happiness. A lot of people, are scared to be happy. I don't deserve it. I'll get a 9 hara if I'm too happy or too beautiful or too successful. People won't forgive me. They'll begrudge me. So fear manifests itself in many different ways. And sometimes it's very important to identify fear so we can see it in ourselves so that we can move forward, because fear is very paralyzing. One woman told me that when she has to get up, even to give a toast or just say something and there's more than another person, she freezes. Public speaking to her is like jumping off a cliff. It's fearful. So there's a story about the Knesset. The economy in Israel was in terrible shape. They said, what should we do? They came up with a brilliant plan. They're going to attack America, the United States. The United States will demolish Israel and then send $1 billion to rebuild. So they took a vote and everyone said, excellent idea. But one little old Knesset member raises his hand and he says, no. What happens if we win the war? What will happen then? So let's start with the story of what transpired since last week. We ended off last week where Miriam had leprosy because she spoke about Moshe, even though she had good intentions. Good morning, Celia.
Good morning.
And now the Jewish people travel and is coming to the pivotal point of their entire journey. We are getting ready to enter into Eretz Yisrael, the Holy Land called Canaan. So the people come to Moshe and they go, Moshe, before we take another step, we need to send spies. We have to see how are we going to conquer the land? How are we going to do this? Can't just go into a foreign country with 1 million+ people. They'll attack us. They won't let us into the country. They'll close the borders. So we need to send out spies to go through the lands and see how to conquer. Do we go to the north? Do we go to the south? Do we go this way? Do we go that? Do we attack here? Do we attack there? So Moshe, as always, goes to God and says, God, the people want to send spies. So God says the pivotal words, Shlach lecha anashim. You want to send spies? Send to you men. Spies, send to you. So first of all, the grammar is very weird. What does it mean, send to you spies? Send for you spies. Send spies. Okay, Moshe, you want to send spies? Go ahead, send spies. Why? To you. So God is saying to Moshe, remember, it's your idea. It's not my idea. It's for you, for your benefit. I don't think we need spies. You want spies? Good morning, Margaret. You send spies. So for you, it's your idea. Remember, I never thought this was a good idea. And the Baal HaTurim says, good morning, Margaret. Good morning. So beautiful that I love, which so ties in always with our theme. Remember how the Torah was first given to the women. Baal HaTurim says, what does it mean, Shalach lecha anashim? Send for you men. God says, it would be a much better idea to send women in as the spies, not men, because you'll get much better results with the women. And God is right, as we'll soon see. So in God's opinion, if the women would have gone and sought out the land and checked it out, the end result, as we'll soon see, would have been very different than what happens. Okay? So Moshe says, all right, God, let's do it. But another very interesting insight here. Already there is a new paradigm shift and a new reality happening. Till going in the land of Israel, everything came from God. The splitting of the sea, the clouds of glory, the manna from heaven, the well of Miriam that traveled with them, the fire that lit up the night for them. Everything was done for them without being even asked, in a sense. Now God is saying, when you come to the land of Israel, there's going to be a whole new reality for you. And that means you're going to have to start taking initiative. L'cha. When you come now to Israel, you're going to have to take initiative. You're going to have to make decisions. You're going to have to make choices. So in a sense, God is in an external way letting go and saying, okay, I didn't suggest spies. That was not part of the godly plan, but you feel you need spies to check out the land before we conquer? Send your spies. And this is a very important little note to keep in your thought process, as you'll soon see what happens. So now Moshe appoints 12 spies, 12 Meraglim. Now, these are not ordinary guys. These are from every tribe, the heads of the tribes, the leaders of the tribes. So you're not sending a group of rabble-rousers, shlomazels, people who have ne'er-do-wells. Let's send the nudniks to go. They have nothing to do anyway. Moshe is sending the cream of the crop, so to speak. He's sending the people that will come back with intelligence, an intelligent report. And here we're going to see human psychology, how people think, how people work. That's why I entitled today's lecture, The Psychology of Fear. What happens to people when there is a fear, when there's an inner fear? An outer fear, we know, they run. So let's see what happens. Anybody knows what happens? Anybody want to help with the story before I read it inside? I love to read it in the words of the Torah because I find it, just more interesting. But anybody want to say what happens? What happens to the 12 guys? They go into Israel and what happens? Anybody know?
Well, I know because of the rabbi's talk
go
yesterday.
Go ahead, tell us.
But I don't know.
If you're a scholar, go ahead, go for it.
No.
So what happens, Margaret?
Well, I think all of them but two, whatchamacallit. First of all, they say that there are big giants there. Right. And that they're just little people. But it could be psychological. Who knows? Okay. All then, right. And in the end, only two I think that they should go ahead, and the other ones think that they want to stay where they are. Oh, no, 1 minute. But anyway, you continue. I'm going to be confused. Maybe after 2 lessons, I'll get it straight. Right?
Okay, no problem. Anybody else want to share anything that they know about the famous spies? So Margaret is right. 12 fellows, 12 tribes, 12 representatives travel into the land. And I'd like to read it straight from the Chumash. Is that okay? Okay. Even though these ancient books, by the way, the English needs a lot of improvement, but let's go. Okay? So they go. They spend 40 days, right? So they leave, and 40 days later, they come back with the report. The significance is that the date that they come back is, anybody know, a very significant date. It is known as the saddest day in the Jewish calendar. We fast on that day for the destruction of both temples, Tisha B'Av. So it is very significant that the day they return, with the Lashon Hara, the negative talk about Israel. Okay, I just dropped my Chumash. Give me 1 second. Let me get it. It takes 20 minutes to set it up here. It's like a Torah reading. Give me 1 minute. Okay. Well, 1 second. I'm sorry about that. Okay. Let me get my glasses. The wording is very important also. That's why I'm reading it inside. Okay. Okay, so they come back now, it's Tisha B'Av, and they bring these giant fruits to demonstrate what's going on in the country. And they told him, and we came to dwell in the cities and so on. It is, and surely it flows with milk and honey. However, they say, the people are fierce, and the cities are fortified and very great, etc., etc. And Caleb stilled the people when he said, we should go at once and possess it, for we are well able to overcome it. But the men that went with him said, we are not able to go up against the people, for they are stronger than we. And they spread an evil report on the land which they spied out upon the children of Israel, saying, the land which we passed to spy out is a land that the earth eats up all the inhabitants, and men of great stature, which means giants. And we were like grasshoppers in their sight. When the people heard this, they became so demoralized, so upset, so depressed, so fearful, they began to cry and scream and say, why did you bring us here? Take us back. We would have been better off in Egypt. Aaron, Moshe, it's all your fault. We would have much been better off in Egypt. So Caleb and Yehoshua, Caleb and Joshua, the two spies that did not go with the other 10, they disagreed with the other 10, they fought against the other 10. They said, but the country
you want you to do the 1031, so bring your mask again.
So they said, Ma'od, Ma'od, it's very, very good, the land, very, very good. And I'll explain why they say very, very. But the people did not listen, and they cried and cried. So the 10 spies that came back and spoke and said, we could never capture this land. There are giants. We're like grasshoppers. They demoralized all the people. They came back with such a negative report. This is what happens.
So,
yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, so Freida, did they all did that? Every one of them?
10 of the 12 spies did that.
Okay.
Caleb and Joshua did not agree with the rabble-rousers. I'm sorry, they're not rabble-rousers. With the other 10 spies. Those two tried, you see in the text, Caleb said, no, let's go right now. We could do it. And later on, Joshua and Caleb at the end of this say again, it's Taiv Ma'od. The land is very, very good. It's the land of milk and honey. So now, what's the apparent question we can ask about this? Remember we said, who were these men that went? They weren't, a bunch of dumbbells, uninspired people. They were the leaders of their tribe. So what's the apparent question here?
Why? Why did they do it?
Yeah, exactly. Why? And also think of the history. They just witnessed a God that took them out of Egypt after 210 years of slavery. Miracles. Every day was a miracle. The plagues, the splitting of the sea, the Mount Sinai, everything they saw. Remember all the stories? Did you ever witness even one miracle like this? Did you ever witness a cloud flying over your head, water coming, floating, like almost like a Harry Potter sorcery movie? It's like Star Wars. At night, there's a pillar of fire that lights up the night, and by day, there's a cloud of glory, and doesn't let scorpions touch them. They have manna from heaven. Every day you wake up, think about it. You walk out your front door from your tent, there's breakfast, lunch, and dinner from heaven. And a well of water that just floats around. Oh, you need your water bottle filled up? You went for a run? You don't have to look for water, fresh water. How could they come back and say, we can't capture the land? It's too difficult. What God can't capture a few giants? There wasn't one nation that touched them in all their travels that tried to attack God, stopped them in their feet. So how could they even think that they couldn't capture Eretz Yisrael? It's mind-boggling that this was their rationale, their way of thinking. So what do you think is happening here? It's like really a very, what do they have, memory loss? You know what I mean? You provided, you have every miracle. How could you say this? And demoralize and undermine everything you've been working for. You're about to enter into the promised land. Everybody's so excited. And you say, no. And suddenly everybody starts crying, take us back to Egypt. This is terrible.
Well, maybe they're just afraid of having that independence and being responsible for themselves.
Very good. That's a Kabbalistic insight that I'm going to talk about a little bit.
It's also what you said in the beginning, fear of success. This is what they've been wanting and waiting for, and all of a sudden it's possible for them.
Exactly. Very brilliant. Exactly. So do you want to add something to that? Sometimes the fear of victory is greater than the fear of loss. Of how do you say the opposite of victory? Failure or?
Defeat.
Defeat, exactly. Victory versus defeat. Yes, exactly. The fear of success. But let's just see what God's reaction is, then we're going to go back to it. So what does God say to Moshe and Aaron? They're crying now crocodile tears? I'm going to give them something to cry about. And we see that Tisha B'Av, the first destruction of the temple, first temple destroyed, second temple destroyed, and we know what happened, the terrible tragedies, the Holocausts, the many of the expulsions, the pogroms. I think World War I all started on Tisha B'Av. And God says, now they're crying crocodile tears for this? In the future, they will really be crying on Tisha B'Av. So also, before we go back to how the Meraglim, but what about God's reaction? Is it tit for tat? Quid pro quo? Is God vengeful? Is that how God is? You're crying? I'm going to give you what, like a mother says, you're crying because you don't want to wear the new pants? They're too itchy. I'll give you something to cry about. It doesn't seem like a reaction that a God would have, our God would have. But God is saying something very deep to them. He's not saying, I'm going to give you something to cry about. God says to them, if you are forgetting your inner spiritual power in the face of challenges, adversity, or the unknown, now, in the future, that means you will not have it when you really need it. When the darkest times come before you and you can't tap into your spiritual energy and power that you were given to face challenges, darkness, and things that happen in life that are challenging, and we all have challenges, then what are you going to do when it's a real challenge? In other words, why have you forgotten about your inner spiritual energy and your connection? That this is what the neshama, the soul, the inner spiritual power is what allows us to rise above challenges. It allowed Jews to survive the Holocaust. It allows us in every generation to conquer the challenges that befall us. It's our spiritual energy. It's our spiritual power. It's our godly soul. So God is saying to the people, now you cannot tap into that. What happens when it really becomes bad in the future for you? This is what God is telling them. Is it clear? God is saying, you have such an energy. Why are you fearful? Tap into that. Because you're going to need it in the future. You're really going to need it in the future. So that is what God is responding to them. He's not saying, I'm going to get you later. He's saying, think about it. I'm sure we always tell our children, and that now you're upset. What happens when you really think about real loss, real tragedy, real pain? How are you going to deal with real pain in your life? One of my kids threw a tantrum about the most silly thing and said, think about when you get married and you have another person in a relationship. It's not so easy. What, you throwing a tantrum about a little thing? Think about when you have someone else and children in your life. You're going to let that little thing tick you off? That's what God is saying to them. So now the question goes back again. How could they tell the people and demoralize an entire nation? They undermined everybody. They made everybody miserable. No one wanted to go into the land anymore, except Caleb and Joshua and the women. By the way, the women did not participate. The women, that's why God said he should have sent the women. This is exactly what God meant. And before, again, I want to say one more thing. The end of the story is that they do not go into the land of Israel. If you recall, for 40 more years, they stay in the desert, and every man perishes in the desert. And it is the next generation of men and the wives, the widows, and the daughters who go into the land of Israel with Joshua, because Moshe also will soon, not in this Torah portion, also passes away in the desert with his people.
But isn't that being vengeful, or, you know?
But I was going to talk about that, and when we talk about Moshe, but just in a nutshell, because it's very powerful, and I always find it very emotional. Everyone, when we were growing up, we were taught, why didn't Moshe go into the land of Israel? Didn't he deserve it? He put up with what he put up with, right? He went on self-sacrifice. He put up, and he always stood up for his people. Didn't he deserve? But so we were taught, remember the story where he hits the rock because there's no water? You said, oh, he got punished. This is what we're taught as children in yeshiva. But now, studying Kabbalah and Jewish mysticism, there's a much more powerful reason. Moshe doesn't go into Israel because his people don't go into Israel. At the end of the day, Moshe is the quintessential leader of his people. He is the people and the people are him. You cannot break up the two. That's why there's a song, there's a little bit of Moses in every one of us. Moshe is the quintessential leader. My people died in the desert, I die with them. Moshe could not go in because his people didn't go in. Remember, they all died out, except for the women, the girls, and the next generation of men go in. So it's very tragic, but they got what they wanted. Oh, you don't want to go in? Don't go in, God says. And they pass away in the desert for 40 years. They continue traveling, and they don't go in. And Moshe stays with his people. That is, yes, go ahead, Diane.
Well, I remember learning that they had this slave mentality, and that's why they weren't able to overcome their fear, because they didn't think highly of themselves. They were so submissive from where they came from that they had to go to the next generation to rid themselves of that.
That's beautiful. That's a beautiful insight. And exactly, maybe this is along the lines. I was going to present it a little differently, but let me bring it up right now. What do they say in their words? We were like grasshoppers in their eyes. So this is one of the psychological insights I'm going to share with you now. How we deal with fear. How we deal with fear. So I saw a very interesting thing that I want to share with you. Do you ever remember Aaron T. Beck, of cognitive therapy? Okay, so Aaron T. Beck is the inventor of cognitive therapy. And he shares, and I think the story of the Meraglim, that's why I'm bringing it to you, shows about 4 or 5 insights on how we deal with fear and challenges. And you could see it very much with the Meraglim. The philosophy of fear, like I said to those who weren't there in the very beginning, what did Roosevelt say? You have nothing to fear but fear itself. And just to reiterate, those of you who came a little later, there's not only fear of failure, there's fear of success, this fear of being happy. You know, some people ask them, why are you happy? I don't know. I feel guilty when I'm happy. I feel I'm going to get a kanahara if I have too nice of a house or a car. Why? You deserve it. You deserve it. Why? You deserve to live beautifully. Whenever I hear, this is my own person, when I hear somebody has a gorgeous home, gorgeous something, material, we're talking about materials, I feel so happy. I never say, oh, I wish I say that I wish I had that house too. I don't say, oh, why do they deserve it? What about it? They get nothing more to spend on their money? No. Give tzedakah, but also live beautifully. What's so terrible? God gave it to you. You were blessed with wealth. You were blessed with means. Live beautifully. Share your wealth, of course. Give tzedakah, but why not? Why not? I would buy a Tesla in a second. I have to tell you honestly. If I had the funding, you know what I mean? Why not? You know, we don't talk about waste. You know, sometimes people spend and they don't, and then you ask them for a little tzedakah, suddenly they don't have. That you don't want. You want a equal distribution. But again, you deserve to be happy. Don't be fearful of success, fearful of happiness. We deserve to be happy. So I want to go through based on the Meraglim's attitude, because I think that will also explain sometimes our fears. We're scared of things that happen. It helps analyze. Remember, everything in the Torah is for us, to make us better, to clarify things in our lives. So I think going through the minds of the Meraglim will make us understand our lives, how we look at things in our lives. So I'd like to share with you some of the things. So sometimes we have an all or nothing attitude, right? And that's the Meraglim. They didn't say, listen, there's giants, there's fortified walls, but we could do it, like Kolek says. They go, no, there's giants, fortified walls, we can't do it. Don't have an all or nothing attitude. Yes, it's challenging. Yes, it's going to be hard, guys, but we can do it. I'm telling you, we can do it. The second thing is negative filter, which means that you say something nice. Oh, it's a land of milk and honey, but the negative overrides the positive.
They went in with negative intentions, whether they realized it or not. They didn't see, they saw the bad stuff and came away with not seeing any of the good stuff.
So maybe their words were a reflection of how they felt inside. Mm-hmm. So negative filtering means even though there's good, you only hear the negative. Mm-hmm. You know, the beach is stunning, but I'm telling you, those jellyfish, they're going to bite you, they're going to kill you, you're going to end up in the hospital. So what do you see? You hear the jellyfish. You're not able to hear how gorgeous the beaches are. They didn't hear how the land is milk and honey and gorgeous fruit. Oh, but there's giants, forget it. The next thing is you jump to conclusions. You jump to conclusions. There's giants, must be terrible there. There's fortified walls, we can't get in. How do you know? You didn't even try. And then an attitude of catastrophe. What did the Jews say? We're all going to die here. We're never going to leave the desert. We should have stayed in Egypt. It's horrible. It's terrible. It's all over. Really? It's all over? Why is it all over? Just because they said that it's all over? You don't have a God? You don't have faith? You didn't see what happened to you till now? And then blame. We all love to blame. Moshe, Aaron, why'd you take us out of Egypt? What did you do for us? Who needed you? Yeah, we were slaves, but at least we weren't being attacked by giants. Yeah, we were slaves, but at least we're not going to die out in the desert. So right away, they're blaming somebody. We always like to blame. It's hard to take accountability for your actions. Let me blame somebody. Let me find somebody to blame. And let me just think if there's anything else. Oh, and the last thing in the cognitive therapy is rejecting any evidence to negate your negativity. Someone says to you, you know, they're fortified walls, they're giants, but you know, we have nuclear rockets. We have the AK-7s, we have God. No. I don't know. And again, they like to reharp the negative. There's giants, they have fortified walls, we'll never break through. But what do you mean? We have God on our side. No. They always reject the positive. So these are some things that in our lives, we, at many different times, you know, not every day you do all 7, but times, think about moments when things came your way and how you reacted and how I reacted. Think about yourself. How do you react when something happens? You know, and when you identify reaction, when you identify how you deal with fear and pain and challenges, you can analyze how to better deal with it and how to, like we said, tap into that spiritual energy that helps us overcome, counteract, work it out. what do you call when you surf it? Sometimes you have to surf. Sometimes you have to get through it. There's no way to not get through. Somebody passes away. You have to get through it. You have to surf. You know, I always tell my kids, you have to be like a surfer. You go up and you go down, you fall, you get back on your board. Life, you're surfing. So these things in Meraglim teach us how to deal with things that happen in our lives. But one of the most important things was what they said was, we are like grasshoppers. We are like grasshoppers. They're giants and we're grasshoppers. And I think that of all these things we can relate to very well, that many times it's how we perceive ourselves. If you look at yourself like a grasshopper, you think, oh, everyone is looking at me, that I don't belong here. No one is looking at you. You think everyone is looking at you. So typical example, you go to a cocktail party and you feel a sense of like not belonging. You don't feel you're part of the elite, the clique, society, whatever it is. And you think, oh, she's looking at me. Oh, wow, my shoes are not, they're not what she would wear. My dress is not what she would wear, and so on. But really, no one is looking at you. You're looking at you. So you envision yourself as a grasshopper. So you're thinking they're looking at you like you're a grasshopper. So the Meraglim said, yeah, we are like grasshoppers in their eyes. They're giants. They're going to just trample on us. We're grasshoppers. So the Torah says this was their downfall. They had such a low self-confidence in being able to conquer the land that they envisioned themselves as lowly, as grasshoppers. Really, later on, we find out that they were trembling in fear. The nations living in Israel were so scared that they built walls and gates to hold Israel out, to hold the Jews out. They were so scared. So they kept looking at themselves as grasshoppers, and really the nations in Israel that were living in Canaan were saying, oh my gosh, they're going to come, it's all over for us. So how do you perceive yourself? If you look at yourself like you're an ant about to be trampled, no one's going to look at you. They don't know what you're thinking, but you're thinking it. So you in your life will be like always the underdog. Oh yeah, they're looking at me like I don't deserve this. They don't like, what are you doing here? You don't belong here. No one is thinking that. You're thinking that. So you're projecting. So the Meraglim were projecting their insecurities on the enemies, on the nations living in Canaan. Is that clear? Does everybody understand what was going on here? Mm-hmm. So this was why they felt they could not conquer the land, because it was all self-perception, low self-esteem in a sense. So this is, I feel, also pretty literal. Not self-understood, but normal, right? Would you think that this is a reason? You don't feel courageous enough. You don't feel you have the power or potential to conquer. You feel like you're a grasshopper. That's a pretty apparent answer. What do you think? I think so. But a more deeper answer, based on the fact of who they were, is what I forgot who touched upon it. Maybe, I don't know, Anne? Or that they liked their life in the desert. They were sabotaging the future. What did they know? When we get into the land of Israel, it's going to be l'cha. You're going to have to set up police stations, courts of law, schools, yeshivas, mikvahs, stores, houses. You have to plant. You need to divvy up the land. You got to settle over 1 million immigrants. You got to set up a country. You know how daunting that is? How hard it is? You have to earn a living. You're going to have to pay bills. You're going to have to pay Con Edison, pay for water, pay for oil, pay for fuel, buy groceries. You're not going to get 3 meals a day. Your wife is going to have to start washing dishes, and you're going to have to dry the dishes, or vice versa. You have to do laundry. You know, their clothes were washed in the desert automatically. They never had to change. So they said, what, are we crazy? Why would we want to go to Israel? Moses sits all day teaching us with the great sages. Why would we want to go to Israel and spread out? What do I need the headache for? My little condominium is perfect. I don't need a mansion with a swimming pool. I don't need the headache. So spiritual. Yeah, go ahead.
I used to have a boss who would say, it's inertia. No matter how bad your bad job is, it's hard to move on and get a good one because you're so comfortable in the momentum of the negative day. You just can't break out of it. It's hard.
You know, that's right. It's a very good point how many people stay in a negative place because it's scary to go to a better place. It's scary to move, scary to change the school of your child, scary to get a new job. It's scary to move to a new state. And was it scary? Right, you're mute. I'm mute. Unmute. Unmute.
No, because I really wanted it for many years.
Oh,
So that
so it
was
was-
kind of like a goal of mine.
Go to
my
the promised land.
Well, my sister was here and my father
Oh.
was here. So it wasn't like we were picking up and we didn't have family or I didn't know anybody.
So
Yeah.
people are scared. We get stuck in a rut. So they said, why should we go to the land of Israel? Spiritually, we're better in the desert. And they knew that once they go to the land of Israel, says Chassid, this Jewish mysticism based on Kabbalah, that they would have to start even on a spiritual level, it would take on a new reality. The ness, miracles that happen every day in their lives would not be so apparent because God is basically telling them, now you have to take the Torah that I gave you at Sinai and bring it into reality in the real life. Remember, they couldn't do most of the mitzvahs in the desert. They didn't have agriculture, farming. There's no way to, like, who are they giving tzedakah from? Where was the money coming from? Even little things. Kosher, they didn't have to kosher, slaughter animals, and not mix milk. What were they eating all day? Manna. So all the mitzvahs and the foundation of the universe of why they were created can only be fulfilled in a real life. Living in the desert is like going to Disneyland. It's like going on vacation. Then you have to go back to reality. They didn't want that. They did, so they sabotaged. They didn't want it. So that is the deeper reason that they came back and said, look, what? And that's what Caleb and Yeshua, what did they say to him? But the land is very, very good. Israel is very, very, what's very, very? That you're defying your whole reason of existence. They're telling the other people. You are meant to live in a real life. That is why you were created. God put you here for a mission in your life. Your mission is to take the material and imbue it with spiritual. Take light and chase away darkness. And ma'od, that even in nature, even living a natural, normal life, where you have labor pains when you give birth, where it's hard to make a living, where you have to get up early in the morning sometimes and go to sleep late at night, where there's illness and challenges, there is miracle even in nature. Ma'od is you're not giving up miracles. You think you're giving up miracles, you're just going to have them as part of nature. Our biggest mistake is sometimes not realizing that every day is a miracle. We forget, and that's what they thought. We never will see a miracle again. So Caleb and Joshua looked at things differently. You know, they had already gone through cognitive therapy, so they said, Ma'od, you're forgetting, guys and gals. You're going to have the teva. You're going to live in nature. You're going to live a normal life, what we call an average life. But in life is ma'od, is also the ness. First ma'od, very, is teva, nature, and the second ma'od is ness. In God's world, which is our world, miracle and nature are both. Nature is also a miracle. We just don't see it that way. God, the whole world is miraculous. How do you know? Because when God created the world, God created it from nothingness. So I touched upon this a few months ago, that if God were to stop one day and say, listen, I need a vacation. I'm going to an outer world, the world would go back to nothingness because it was created from nothingness. So the Kabbalah says every second the world is recreated because it has to be. God has to keep the wheel turning to keep the world going. Right? When you shut off the water, there's no more water from the sink. You have to keep the water running. God steps away, metaphorically speaking, the world would go back to nothingness because it was created. Not unlike you and me, we make something, you make a table, you don't have to knock in a nail every single day to keep the legs on. Once you knock in the nail, the leg stays on, right? But the world is not, because it wasn't made from anything. So nature is also a miracle. We just don't see it that way. Remember the miracle of Entebbe, where the hostages were taken to Uganda and they went in, and only one Israeli soldier, Netanyahu's brother, was shot down as they were leaving, killed, but not one hostage was hurt. So the Rebbe spoke about that and said, look at this miracle from God. What are the chances of going into a foreign hostile country and rescuing every hostage? Right? Remember the miracle of Entebbe? But what did all the newspapers write? That they were well trained. Wow, what a success story. No one mentioned God in the miracle, in the story. No one mentioned God except for the Rebbe. And my father wrote about it also. The miracle of Entebbe. Till this day, people will tell you it wasn't a miracle. People want to deny that we live in a miraculous world. Everything is a miracle. We depend on miracles. Think about it. So they did not see that. They thought, oh, we'll go to Israel. God is that's it. The miracles are gone. Life as we know it is gone. And Kalev and Yeshua said, no, it's not gone. So what happens then? There's a plague, and the 10 spies die right away. For 40 years, they're in the desert. They all, the men and these, die out, and the next generation enters into the land of Israel. This is the story of the Meraglim. There's consequences, like we say. There's consequences of what happens to them.
Couldn't you argue that it's not really their fault because they were slaves? They were downtrodden.
You know, yes, you could argue, but we discussed that why were there 10 plagues? Kabbalah asks, couldn't God just do it with one swoop, make one plague, schlep them out? Because they, the Hebrews, the Israelites, the Jews had to see the hand of God in every part of the world. The animal life, the rivers, life. Because, like you say, you could take a slave out of Egypt, but you can't take Egypt out of the slave. The slave mentality was entrenched for 210 years, generation and generation, your son and your son and your next son, and your daughter and her daughter and her daughter. So God just couldn't whisk them out. There's a psychological impact here. You know, I hate to use this as an example. Remember Game of Thrones? So they go to rescue that guy that was mutilated by his captors. He doesn't want to go out of the cell. They can't pull him out. His sister comes to rescue. He doesn't leave because he's so denigrated. They turned him into such a piece of nothingness. The nothingness didn't allow him to get rescued. To me, that was a very painful scene. He wasn't a good person, you know, but just to illustrate psychological torture. This is prisoners in camp. You know, what do they call that syndrome, the Stockholm syndrome? You begin to look at your captors. So it's not so easy to take someone out. You can't just pull them out of jail. There's a deep programming of people. So you could say that, yeah, they still had that, and then maybe that's the problem. They still had it, Diane, but they were the leaders of the tribes. They were the role models of their tribe. So it's not that they could, maybe deep down, not maybe, Diane, deep down they obviously had this fear. Fear of success, fear of victory. But there's one more commentary I want to share because you brought it up. There's one more commentary that said that, remember I told you in the previous class, Moses appointed elders and wise men to help him because he couldn't run the show himself. So he appointed 70 men to be judges, prophets, and help him out to deal with 1 million people, complaints, disputes, problems, marriage counseling, therapy, right? So he appoints 70, and 2 of them, Eldad and Medad, suddenly start to prophesy, because once he appointed them, they attained the power of prophecy. And what do they say? They start saying Moses is going to die in the desert and Joshua is going to take us into the land of Israel. Remember that story?
Mhm.
So, Caleb and Yoshua, everybody's very upset. Look at them. This is blasphemy. This is blasphemy. But really, they knew it was true. So the heads of the tribe said to themselves, I'm quoting a commentary here, why should we go into the land of Israel and speed up the death of Moses? Once we go, Moses is going to die. It's in the prophecy. So they felt altruistic in fighting the entry into the land of Israel because they were so dedicated to Moshe. So one commentary says this is the whole reason they came back with a report. They undermined it because they did not want to lose their Moshe. They couldn't imagine how could we lose our Rebbe, our leader, a man who gave up everything for us. They couldn't fathom a life without Moshe. If he ain't going into Israel, we're not going into Israel. So this commentary said they self-sabotaged. They self-sabotaged because of Moshe, their dedication to Moshe. So if you look at all the reasons, they were very altruistic. We don't want to give up a spiritual life. We don't want to lose our Moshe. But at the end of the day, it is considered a sin because they went against the will of God.
Mhm.
Brings another little interesting tidbit that remember, it's not always about what you feel, what you need, what you want. There's a bigger picture. In a relationship, it's what the other person needs and wants too, even if you don't understand. And in our relationship with God, how much more so? So God said, it's time to go into the land of Israel. You got to go. I don't want to go. I want my life here. I don't want to lose my Moshe. I'm sorry. God knows the bigger picture. That's why they were killed, the 10, because they went against the will of God. God said, this is what's meant to be. This is what's meant to be. So sometimes your intentions are honorable. Your intentions are good. You self-sabotage because you feel you're right. If my husband gets that new job, yeah, we're going to make triple the money, but we're going to have to move to Des Moines, Iowa, where the nearest store is 40 miles away. I don't want to go. You're going to self-sabotage. You know it's good for the family. Maybe your family needs to be in a smaller town, but you're going to self-sabotage sometimes because you don't want it. For whatever reason, you're fearful. You're giving up your friends. Will I have a nice enough house? I'm not in the right area. I'm not in the right neighborhood. I'm not near my parents. I'm not near my sister. I'm not near my brother. So there's many reasons we go against a situation. There's a fear. And again, that's why God gave us the powers to evaluate when there's a situation in our lives. You know? And Jews, b'chlal, we like to kvetch. You know that book called Kvetch. What's it called? The Jewish Kvetch or Kvetch. 3 mothers get together to play mahjong every Wednesday. And the hostess goes to bring in some, coffee. And one mother says, yeah. And the second mother says, Gewalt. And the third mother says, Weh is mir. And the hostess comes out with the coffee. Ladies, I told you today we're not talking about the children. It's only mahjong.
I have another one.
Go
I
ahead.
have another one. The same 3 ladies are having lunch, and the waiter comes over and he goes, "Ladies, is anything all right?"
Very good. Exactly. Very
That's
good. I like that
good.
one even better.
That's it.
So we have 10 more minutes. I'll share one more thing in conclusion because it really rounds out everything we've said, is that right before they go forth, God says there's going to be 3 mitzvahs I'm going to give you for the land of Israel, part of the 613. One is the mitzvah of tzitzit, which men wear under their shirts, and some men wear the talit, on their shoulders on Shabbat. And tzitzit, challah, the mitzvah of taking a challah from baking 3 pounds of bread or more, You know, we always do that when you bake bread. When the dough is ready, you let it rise. You break off a chunk, like a fistful. You say, Baruch atah Hashem Elokeinu melech haolam asher kiddushanu b'mitzvayso v'tzivanu al hafrashat challah, harei ze challah. The blessing on separating the dough, and then you say, this is the dough, this is the separation. Challah means separation. You wrap that piece in parchment paper or foil, and you burn it in the oven. The mitzvah of challah, and in the days of the temple, they would give that chunk of challah to the Kohen to take home for his family. Imagine the Kohen is getting like 7,000 chunks, so he gets home, goes home with tons. And the third mitzvah God tells them in the land of Israel is the pouring of wine on the offerings. When they brought offerings to the temple, there was the mitzvah of pouring wine on the offerings in the temple. So these three mitzvahs, God is basically telling them that when you come to the land of Israel, you're not giving up the well of water of Miriam because you're going to have the pouring of the wine. You're not giving up the manna from heaven because you're going to have the mitzvah of challah, which I'll explain in a minute. And you're not giving up the cloud of glory that protected you all day and night from enemies, from wild animals, from the heat, from the rain, from the hurricanes, because I am giving you the mitzvah of, tzitzit. So God gave three mitzvahs to counteract the three energies that they had in the desert. So challah, why do we take off a piece of dough and give it to the Kohen, or now we burn it in the oven, is because it's a reminder about the manna. And all food comes from heaven. Everything we have is from God. So every moment of our lives, we're thankful. We make a blessing over the food. We eat kosher food. And when we bake bread, which is, considered a more symbolic food, we take off a piece of dough and we say, we're separating this. This is a separation. This is for God. Remembering everything comes from God. And we burn that piece of dough in the oven. So every time we do something, we remind ourselves the manna came from heaven and our manna comes from heaven. That's how it is. By the way, these three mitzvahs were emphasized in the now. Not that they weren't given at Sinai, they were emphasized. They were emphasized. Oh, I have to share one more interesting thing. Remember we discussed that the 10 spies, right? What happens to them? There's a plague and they die. So this is the reason why a minyan in the synagogue is 10 men and not 10 women. People always ask me. God said 10 got together to talk evil about Israel and undermine the confidence of all the people of Israel. Now, when you gather together to pray for good, 10 have to gather. You want to have a prayer service? 10 men, not 10 women. Why? The women did not participate with the spies. When the spies came back and started to say we could never do it, the women told their husbands, guys, you're crazy. We're going. We're leaving. We're going to Israel. We're not following you because God said he's taking us in. The women had the faith. The women counteracted their husbands. In Egypt, the husband said, let's not have any children. It says they beautified themselves and they seduced their husbands and they had many babies. The women come into the desert, into the splitting of the reed sea. It says the women danced with Miriam. The sin of the golden calf. The men said, guys, ladies, come on, we need the jewelry. We have to melt the gold and make a calf. We need a god. The women said, you ain't taking our jewelry. That's why some men have a custom not to wear jewelry, because the men gave the jewelry, not the women. And now again, when the men said, ladies, guys, honey, we're not going into the land of Israel. We're staying here. They go, no, we're not. You want to stay here in the desert and eat the manna and drink from the well? Go ahead. We're going into Israel. I'm getting my property lines. So because the women persevered time after time because of their inner spiritual faith, 10 is the men because they sinned. They agreed, let's not go into Israel. The women did not follow that path. So rather, it's a way of looking at women in a superior manner, that the feminine soul, the feminine connection did not allow them to join when the disconnect to God. Every single time they rebelled. Now, you're not talking about 2020 when women vote and we're all feminists and we all have a place. And no man would say to woman, "What, cooking is your department." No one says that anymore. It's ridiculous. The Torah has always highlighted the feminine strength and the feminine energy. And lauded the women. We were taught the Torah first. What does that tell you? But God is worried. God knew. You send women as spies. You want to check out the land, send the women. You're making a mistake sending those men. But okay, you want to send the men, send the men. So here you see, so this is one of the main reasons why when 10 men gather for a minion, it's men, males, not women. Not because women can't be counted. God forbid. One of us is 10 of them, I can tell you right now, spiritually. and also, like, it's very interesting because I grew up in Chabad, in Lubavitch, by the Rebbe, where the Rebbe spent every Shabbos, every lecture spoke about the feminine strength, the feminine energy, the feminine superiority. The Rebbe spoke to I remember one Passover, it was right before Passover. And the Rebbe's birthday is right before Passover, so the Rebbe would have like a 6-7 hour gathering for the men and the women. So the Rebbe stops in the middle of the gathering and says to the guys, "Why are you all thinking about making your house Passover and how many cabinets you got to clean? Your wives are sitting up there listening and you guys are thinking about Passover cleaning." The Rebbe was reprimanding the men in the audience that they're distracted. Whereas he sees the women in the women's section are listening very nicely. So the Rebbe was showing here that the guys were distracted about Passover cleaning, but the wives weren't. The wives were focusing on the lecture. You understand what I'm saying? So the Rebbe always built up and made us realize as women our true potential. So I could never look in the mirror and say, "I'm a grasshopper."
Well, wouldn't it be the women who were cleaning up? Is that
No, the men have to clean for Pesach. The women have to get manicures, pedicures, buy new clothes, and sit down at the same. Really? In all Jewish homes, especially if you have 11 children, the guys help, the boys help, the women help, everyone helps. There's no such thing as the mother cooks and the father tastes. No. If the father cooks, it's okay. Any household that doesn't share household responsibility, remember, we're not housekeepers, we're homemakers. We build the foundation, the spiritual energy of the home. Not that we are the potato peelers and make the beds. First of all, you got to get a cleaning lady. It's normal people. But second of all, no, it's equality is spiritual equality in Torah, but also in the realm of life, there has to be equality. And in Judaism and Torah, there was always equality, but the society, secular society, infiltrates Judaism. We start following everyone else instead of following what we were brought up with. The Torah is the leading advocate for women's rights and women's voting. Secular society has drifted into our mindset. That's why women walk around feeling they're inferior in the spiritual realm because we're inferior in the secular realm. Not realizing the spiritual realm, if you look at Torah, women always had rights in every way. Now, interesting is the daughters of Shlach came to Moses and says, "Where's our inheritance?" There were no men in the family. Remember that story? So they fought for their property rights in Israel and they won. God said, "That's right, you better give them their land." It's not only for men. If there's no males in the family, the women get the land. So you see many, many stories here. So I felt this was very important to bring now because this is the story, this is the reason that we have a minyan. God said, "You want to gather? 10. Why there's a minyan 10? Because of the 10 spies. They were called the Ada. Ada means 10. That's how we derived that a minyan is 10. Because why isn't it 10? 12, because 2 of the spies did not participate. Is that so far clear? I just didn't want to go off. Okay.
I never heard that before, so that's great.
So this is the reason. And by the way, Judaism, one more little tidbit. Remember I said we should have a talk on feminism and Judaism, But one of the things is, if you look at the Torah, where is the foundation of Jewish life? Everybody just say your thought. Where is
Home.
Judaism found? Home.
And home.
Not in shul, not in the temple, in the home. In the home. In the home. The home is the foundation of Judaism and the Torah in the world. So if you look at the synagogue as your spiritual life, then it's a problem. If Judaism only exists in shul, then I mentioned it's a problem, because you're saying, oh, I'm not part of the minyan. I'm not being called up to the Torah. The rabbi is a man, the cantor is a man, and I'm sitting separate. But if you realize that shul is just a prayer place, then that's not, we mean to say the once a year you go to shul, the once a month you go to shul, or even if you go to shul every Shabbos. Like I grew up Friday night, we went to shul Shabbos day. It's still not my whole life. My whole life is the rest of the week. Shul does not define my spiritual life. 365 days a year, we have mitzvahs that we have to do. We go to the mikvah and we light Shabbos candles. So I'll conclude with this. One morning, my sister calls me and we're both overwhelmed. She has 9 babies crying in the background, and I have 11 babies. And this is when the kids were little. And my sister and I were both giving a talk called Sister Act. We were doing a talk together on feminism and Judaism, and we were discussing what we were going to say. And we were laughing, and I said to Chani, aren't you glad that you don't have to run out to shul and put on tefillin? Because look what's going on in your home. Your 9 babies are all screaming. Imagine if you had to wrap it up now too, and put on your talis. So Chani and I said, yeah, you're right. We are so busy with the other 622 mitzvahs. Thank you very much. I don't need another 10 on my lap. This is just our humor. Of course, we want to do many mitzvahs, but no, thank you. So I laugh sometimes. A woman called me up. She says to me that her rabbi suggested she start putting on tefillin, like her husband. So she said, how do you feel about it, Freida? And I said, I think it's fine. I think it's a great mitzvah. I didn't want to knock it down for her. And I said, but one more thing I want to suggest before you go out and buy your $500 pair of tefillin, because that's what they cost, I would like, after your menstrual cycle, I want you to go to mikvah. I want you to come, we'll study the laws of mikvah, and you'll go immerse in the mikvah, and then that's a good time to start putting on tefillin, I told her. I said, because mikvah is a pivotal foundation of the Jewish home, more than tefillin. Tefillin was given the mitzvah to men, again, they needed that antibiotics. We'll talk about it another time. So she says, I never looked at it that way. I said, yeah, first take on the mitzvah that's for your soul. Then you want extra vitamins, then you could start putting on tefillin. I didn't want to negate it because it's not forbidden for a woman to put on tefillin. It's not forbidden. You could put on tefillin, but does your soul need it? No. Once you're on top of a mountain, you don't climb down. That's why you don't get an aliyah. Aliyah to Torah means go up to the Torah. Women are already up. We are already on the top of Sinai. We reached the peak. You don't go down to go back up. So if your soul has already reached the pinnacle of your fulfillment and your energy, you don't go down. Why would you go down? So that's all mitzvahs have a rhyme and a reason. So when you start analyzing each mitzvah to understand why God gave us these mitzvahs, then you realize, again, we didn't write the mitzvahs. If I wrote the mitzvahs, I could say, Celia would say, Freida, we should modify it. We need to modify. But I didn't write it and you didn't write it. God wrote it. And God wrote it. He doesn't discriminate against his creations. He knows what every soul needs to fulfill their mission on earth. So again, let's just sum up. The Meraglim didn't want the land of Israel, and they might have been right from their viewpoint. But Israel symbolizes our promised land. We all have a journey. They were fearful. It's scary. We don't know what lies ahead. But we have to know that we all have to take that jump, that leap. And one of them is evaluating how we look at ourselves. I'm no grasshopper. I am a person who's valued, who deserves love, who deserves happiness, and I deserve to journey forth. And even if there's naysayers that say, you're going to do that? What are you, crazy? You're 51 already. Stop with your dreams. Don't listen. If you have a dream, if you have something you see you want to accomplish in your life, don't let anybody hold you back. There's always going to be the naysayers. Where you're going to get the money, how you're going to do it. You're a one-woman show. You're a one-man show. Nobody supports you. There already is something like that that exists. Don't let them stop you from following your dreams, your visions, your aspirations, your promised land. The main thing is to get there. So have a wonderful week. And if you bake challah, don't forget to take off that piece.
Good Shabbos, Freida.
Good Shabbos. That's why women
Good Shabbos.
Good Shabbos. People bake
Good Shabbos.
every week so they can take the challah off. Yeah, they
But
like.
you have to make more than 3 pounds.
Yes,
on
3
each
pounds, like 7 ounces or something.
Really?
Yes.
Yeah.
And you do it. Otherwise, it's not considered officially baking bread. No?
Well, you can do the piece, but you can't say the prayer. That's what
Right.
you
You
told
can do the piece. It doesn't hurt to practice separation, giving. Remember, take the piece of dough. Don't throw it at your husband because he didn't do a good job at the kneading. Burn it in the oven. Because I hate to knead. I told the boys, they're good kneaders. They have good strength, my sons. I said, boys, you're going to knead. I'm going to mix. I can't. But it is a beautiful mitzvah. I just want to say one more cute thing. I don't bake challah every week. My daughter bakes 60 challahs a week. But one week, I decided to bake. I'm baking. My kids walk in. Wow, that smell. And I saw like a new energy in my children. They were like falling in love with the whole thing and the whole household. And it brought love to the house. And I'm like, what? Just from baking challah, I'm going to do this all the time. The whole family kind of like sniffed it and felt like, wow, mommy loves us. This is amazing. So I see that challah has so many beautiful benefits. If it brings harmony and the kids feel cared for because she's actually baking it and not buying it, what's the big deal? So I'm going to, I started to bake a little more often now, just to hear them say, wow. And they get excited every time I bake challah, and I don't know why, but they get excited. So there you go. New excitement, new energy. Have a wonderful week. A pleasure. Any last questions, comments? Okay. A real
Thank
pleasure.
you
Thank
so
you for the
much.
honor.
Thank
For the
you.
privilege,
Thank
really.
you.
Beautiful lesson. Beautiful.
That
Thank
was
you.
a beautiful lesson.
Wow.
Thank
Thank you
you.
very much. Okay.
Thanks, Freida.
A real
Shabbat
honor.
shalom.
Be well. Bye-bye.
Be
Shabbat
well.
shalom.
Bye.
Shabbat shalom. Shabbat. Love to
Shabbat
everyone.
shalom.
I love.
Be
Bye.
well.
Bye,
Bye-bye.
Diane.